I sent out this really random tweet,
Yes.
right? And the tweet simply said, do y'all remember the drink that Issa plugged on Insecure? I just had 5, and I don't know where I'm at in my house or how I ordered 50 wings. 34,000 people on Twitter thought it was funny, including Issa herself. She responded, and I remember before I even saw the numbers, a friend called me and said, hey, if you become a star, I need an autograph. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, go on Twitter right now. So I check, and I think it had maybe like 1,800 likes or something. I'm like, okay, let me turn off the notifications because now my phone is getting really, really hot, right? Because it's
of course.
Yeah, and within hours, it had blown up to like 20,000. But the interesting thing was that as people were responding, they too were saying, hey, Paul, I just made this other cocktail at home. What I do wish was that something was pre-packed in a can using real ingredients, not malt-based liquor. We will talk about that too. That can be shipped to my house because there's, stay-at-home orders. And I thought, holy crap, this scales. Let's go build it.
All right, welcome back to another edition of the Liquid Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Monte Burrow. Today, I'm extremely excited to have with me the man to the right, and he doesn't know I'm about to say this, but you got to see his kicks. You got to put the kicks up. You got to put the kicks up. Paul OWUSU, the founder of Phreshly, essentially a premium cocktail in a can, a beautiful liquid. You see the cans here. We're going to talk about that, Paul. We're going to jump in and have a great conversation about that. But before we get into that, how are you doing this today, my friend?
I'm doing fantastic. It's been quite an incredible, insightful week for me personally, and also on the brand side.
Okay, well, I can't wait to hear a little bit more about that. And I'm telling you guys, if you can see the kicks, I'm telling you, because I am a old school kick aficionado.
Yeah.
I say old school because I haven't had a chance to indulge lately. But he came in here with some fire, and I won't even show you what I got on my feet because it ain't really nothing hot. So kudos to you on the kick game, my friend.
Thank you. I wanted to really play homage back to Ghana. Everywhere I go, I sort of like try to carry home with me.
I love that.
Yeah.
Love that. So let's actually just start there. You mentioned homage to Ghana. Did you grow up in Ghana?
Yes, sir. I was born in Ghana. Both parents from there. I had a very sort of like conservative background upbringing. It's funny. My father was a pastor. Did a lot of man of the cloth work back home. And so fast forward, now an adult selling alcohol, having gone through the church or having gone through theology school, which wasn't really my calling, to be honest, to the space that we're in now. And I think my calling is to serve, and I believe what we're doing is essentially serving people.
That's excellent. Would you say that a lot of your friends growing up took the same route?
No. I think if you look at the cultural implications of like being from the continent, it's like you either go the doctor, engineer, lawyer route, right? Not a lot of us go to business school, MBA, take the sort of like unorthodox route. But here we are, and I think there's a new age of kids growing up outside of the continent that is taking that into their own hands and saying, hey, I want to go work for Netflix, work for a SaaS company in Silicon Valley, or maybe just start a consumer brand.
Where did your entrepreneurial spirit come from then? Forget alcohol for a minute, because I sense that people sometimes have an aura presence about them.
Yeah.
And just sitting next to you for the first time in person, I feel as though there's some stories behind you in growing up and jumping into some rivers. Tell me about where that spirit came from.
As I mentioned, my dad being a man of cloth, growing up, what we'll do is go door to door selling. We're not selling Bibles. We're just giving it to people for free, right? And the last thing anybody wants to hear after waking them up, with a knock on the door at 6 a.m. in the morning, it's, here's a Bible, do you want to come to our church, right? Some people might be very kind in talking to you, some others not so much. And so sort of like finding a rebuttal around that, right? Think of, being a a sales rep at a SaaS company, right? You pick up a phone and call people and like, no, I don't need a solution. And so for me, I was like, great, how do you then find a solution? So solution selling is something that I was very interested in as a kid growing up. So I think that's where it all came from. And also my mother ran a bakery. So I got to have exposure to that side of it.
So let's go back to the Bibles.
Yeah.
And going to the doors.
Yeah.
And presenting the Bibles. Did your dad say, look at the chip off the old block, he's going to be a great pastor like me?
I think very, very early on, it was his dreams and hopes that, yes, I would sort of like follow that pathway, right? And so he would compare me to Joseph in the Bible, for instance, right? And say, hey, you're going to grow up and do great things and be like the head of the family. I'm just like, bro, I'm 7. Like, what are you talking about? But I think looking at family dynamics, specifically on the personal side, now my siblings are doing really incredible with their careers. Some of them retired, but also having that blessing of having your older siblings calling you for counsel, right? That it's a great feeling. So sometimes I think back at those conversations I had with them when I was younger.
Can you think of any of your childhood friends, and is there anyone in particular that stands out that, kind of, I don't want to say groomed you into who you're being, because a lot of who you are, you can tell who a person is by the people they hang around.
Yeah.
Can you think of any of your childhood friends and kind of the things you did, what you appreciated about them, and kind of what they're doing now, just that stands out?
Yeah. So I grew up in a very musically inclined family, except I wasn't able to read or arrange songs or anything like my other siblings did or my dad did. But I had a friend, Nathaniel, lives in Houston now. Sup, Nat. And I'll go to his house. This guy can like take a look at different chords and strings and sort of like replicate that. And I remember very vividly, we were 10. And he'd be sort of like playing the organ at church, and I'll just sit behind him and just like watch. And I'll try to play it. I remember I had a very embarrassing moment in church one time because Nat was sick. I'm like, great, I can do this. I've watched him and failed miserably. And I think what really was incredible about Nat's upbringing was his father was a retired military man. We both grew up in sort of like very strict homes, but his, path of growing up and like the conservatism of him growing up was very different, very chill. I was very much of a rambunctious kid, but also as younger as I was, I realized that I had these moments of being calm and then having really, really high energy at some points, and he was like very, very even keel at all times. I think from your question more specifically, watching him and the things that he grew, specifically around like emotional intelligence, really helped me sort of like understand at a very young age how to sort of take emotions out of things and think about it from a more logical standpoint.
Just a little something that may come in handy down the road in your future life, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's been quite a blessing, both personal and business.
All right, so we'll fast forward a bit. Fintech.
Yes.
Rings a bell, right?
It sure does.
Tell me a little bit about the career pull. The career pull.
Yeah. So I started my career in quote unquote working in tech, right? Yeah. This is before the TikTokers saying, let me teach you how to get, 6-figure whatever job in tech, all that, right? This is before it was like a sexy thing to do. I worked for a company called Yammer.
Yammer.
Yep. Founded by David Sachs, part of the PayPal mafia. These days, it's sort of like a Twitter talking head, but we're not going to go there. And I left the company shortly after the Microsoft acquisition. And I think that really gave me an incredible sense of belonging and confidence that, this black kid from Ghana can go into any early stage startup in Silicon Valley and like lead teams, build cross-functional processes and sort of like lead it to an incredible growth point. So fast forward 2014, my co-founder now, Ama, sends me money because I was going home to Ghana and said, hey, give it to my mom. And I thought, well, there ought to be a way to send cross-border payments, right? That did exist, right? Western Union had huge monopoly in the market. They lobbied local governments, so like no other entrants can come into those markets. And I thought, why don't we just start our own fintech, allowing Ghanaians on the continent and also in the diaspora to be able to send money across borders. So we founded this platform called Sika, which means money in our local dialect. And what we were doing at the time, very, very scrappy, by the way, as you started a new company, was that whenever, say, Paul sends money to Monty in Ghana, another founder or employee for the company will rush to the local bank and then convert it to the local currency, send it to the recipient. Mm. So you sitting at your home in Ghana, thinking, oh, my cousin just said, hey, I just sent you $300, go get it at your bank. You thinking, this is so fast and like so cool. No, we were doing it crazy manually, right? We were breaking all kinds of regulations around KYC, right? Which is who sent the money, what's their name, to make sure that, the money is not going to the wrong person, but also anti-money laundering policies that a lot of fintechs follow. So we did that for close to a year. We weren't able to raise money at the time, so we decided to shelve it. Amma went on to go build her company now, which is built to millions and millions in revenue. And then when we started what we're doing now, she came on board to sort of lead operations.
So thinking about that entrepreneurial leap,
yeah.
If we were to go back for a quick second, and I want to come back to that, but we go back for a quick second. Your time at Yammer.
Yes.
Because the reason why it kind of gave me the aha moment is because when I was in corporate America, they introduced Yammer to us, and they were like, it's like if Slack.
It was before Slack.
But that's just
it. Was Slack before Slack.
And it reminds me of a bit about, it reminds me of a corporate version of Facebook, the when it first rolled out.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
I don't know what the business was behind it, but are there any moments that stood out to you even during your time? When you joined Yammer, was it, hey, I'm here, and here's my career, and I'm on the fast track. I want to basically become the CEO of Yammer. I'm not saying you would think that, but or was it always, in the back of your mind, at some point, I need to do or want to do my own thing?
So I'll answer the first bit or the last bit just now. I think entrepreneurship is not necessarily go and start something of your own, right? You can be a change maker within somebody's organization, pushing them to incredible heights. We've seen that. There's incredible B players out there that nobody knows about, but they're the people behind the machine. Right. But going back to the beginning of it, I remember applying for Yammer and we don't know what to do with this kid. He came from managing a call center, never worked at a tech company before. And I'll call the recruiter, every Friday, right? I was using Boomerang. Yes. I just launched, sending him emails. And I remember when I started, I went into one of the group chats and they're like, this kid keeps sending emails every day. Right. What do we do with him? So they hired me. But they hired me as an SDR. It goes back into when I was a kid, knocking on doors.
Right.
That's what I'm doing. I'm knocking on doors saying, hey, by the way, if you buy this platform, it increases, visibility and transparency with regard to communications internally. You get to have wikis internally, share all of your, files, so everything is centralized, right? You have this repository of data internally. But there's something really interesting about that. As we're doing that, we're pitching the services of the consulting team, right? So customer success, who's essentially going to hold your hand, drive, the adoption, the ROI, the change management, essentially keeping the customers alive so companies can continue to grow their revenue. We're pitching their services, and I'm like, who are these guys, right? They're like the Navy SEALs of their startup. People worship them. So I'll fetch their coffee, I'll sit in the meetings, and 3 months later, I moved into that team, and I loved it, right? So my role really was, company A buys, example, Mercedes-Benz, right? How do they use this platform? And it's centered around three things: value, adoption, and relationship. Value in the sense that Paul's company bought this platform. What are the specific feature sets within that specific tool are they seeing to say, this is the best thing ever, we're going to continue using that? And then with the adoption, how are they then inviting the entire 50,000 employee pool? Because the more you add more seats, the more revenue Yammer then gains, the more you as the CS rep or consultant working for them is also being promoted within the organization, right? So I'm doing this and realizing, okay, this is my calling, right? Driving value for customers, right? Teaching them how to get, the ROI. And I think that's what I take into what we do now is how do you drive change? Mm-hmm. How do you communicate that change? How do you educate people without making them feel like you're punching down on them?
Here's what's very interesting to me about that, right? Because you're basically getting a crash course on the business that you're going to be running at some point.
Yeah.
And you're getting it on someone else's dime, which is
absolutely
extremely vital, right? That's a gem, especially for those who are looking to start and are potentially working now and trying to figure out should they take that leap, or is it worthwhile to stay and get a little bit more information?
Absolutely.
When you would go home, what would you do?
Yeah, I mean, like, man, I'll go home and it's so funny, right? So it's just like sexy startup time. There's snack walls. I remember like my first day at Yammer. I was given like $1,000 like whiskey bottle or something. Like the things that they welcome you. I'm like, I wish I known about this, right? 2010, I'm earning at the time it's like $85K, living in the Bay Area. I'm like, this is the best thing ever.
Right.
And I'll go home and I'll just write recipes, cocktail recipes. That's what I did to pass time. And then the funny story about that is I'll go to local restaurants. I'll sit at, the chef table and I'll ask them questions, why are you pairing this duck with orgeat and gin?
Right.
And they'll tell me, and I'll go home and like reverse engineer that cocktail.
Right.
And so I'm getting very good at this. And friends are saying, oh, go start something in food and beverage. I'm like, it doesn't feel authentic to me, right? And I think the key in everything I've always done in my life is authenticity. Does it feel like something that is your true calling, coming back from how I grew up? And if it's not something that feels like a true calling, then I don't want to do it. And it wasn't until a friend of mine was like, dude, you live in the Bay Area, tech is in the backyard, so obviously you're going to gravitate towards that. But I feel like your true calling is food and beverage, so get into it. And none of that really sort of like mattered until fast forward 2020, right? And that conversation happened in 2010.
Wow.
So it's really incredible. But yeah, to your question, I'll go home, write recipes, and I think to date I have 320 original recipes that I haven't done much with other than sort of like introducing friends to it whenever I have like, cocktail parties at home.
So I haven't gotten invited to any of those cocktail parties. If you were asking anyone, we'll talk about that off camera. But I'm glad you shared that cocktail story, because if anyone gets a chance, you have to check him out on Twitter. And we'll give all the handles a little bit later. But going back and seeing some of the cocktails and just his stories is fascinating, which is also why I wanted to have him on the show. So here's the $1 million question, and all of this is going to make sense in a second. Who's your favorite character on Insecure?
Issa Rae, for sure.
Issa Rae?
Yes.
My favorite character is Kelly, just because she's crazy.
Yes.
And I can't remember her real name, but for those who wondering why in the world did we just jump to Insecure, why don't you tell the world about the infamous day with one of those cocktails that you were creating, and kind of how that catapulted you into this chair right now?
Yeah. So the pandemic hit, right? Such unfortunate times for every single American. One, you're afraid to go out. People are getting laid off left and right. For context, I was laid off too, just like many Americans. So what do? I'm passing time by making crap tons of cocktails, right? My wife and I are pregnant at the time, and so I'm giving her like mocktails, of course, and she's enjoying it, and I'm just basically just getting drunk. I'm loving the process. And on June 3rd of that year, 2020, after watching Insecure, and if you remember early seasons of Insecure, Issa's favorite drink was Prosecco with a dash of vodka, and I'm saying dash of vodka very loosely.
Right.
And so I had one using vodka Saint Germain and added a little bit of.
Do you remember what kind of vodka it was?
You know what? I don't remember.
That's good.
Because I'm not a vodka drinker, actually.
That's good.
But we can talk about that in a second. Yes, and I'm like, okay, this is great. And I had quite a few. And so after that, I sent out this really random tweet, right? And the tweet simply said, do y'all remember the drink that Issa Rae plugged on Insecure? I just had 5, and I don't know where I'm at in my house or how I ordered 50 wings. 34,000 people on Twitter thought it was funny, including Issa herself. She responded. And I remember before I even saw the numbers, a friend called me and said, hey, if, you become a star, I need an autograph. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, go on Twitter right now. So I check, and I think it had maybe like 1,800 likes or something. I'm like, okay, let me turn off the notifications, because now my phone is getting really, really hot, right? Because it's
of course.
Yeah, and within hours, it had blown up to like 20,000. But the interesting thing was that as people were responding, they too were saying, hey, Paul, I just made this other cocktail at home. What I do wish was that something was pre-packed in a can using real ingredients, not malt-based liquor. We will talk about that too. That can be shipped to my house because there's, stay-at-home orders. And I thought, holy crap, this scales. Let's go build it. Again, another context here. I've never worked in the beverage space. I have zero idea what I'm doing. But what I do know is that from a growth perspective, I can build something and scale it because the go-to-market is already there. People are telling me what it should be. Build something in a can, ship it to my house. That's the go-to-market from the business side. So I went back into my recipe book and started, tinkling around with a few things. But again, going back into the idea of building a company, you don't want to build this magical unicorn that only you like. So I took that same data. I went into multiple social media platforms. The initiative there was, how do we do a social mining to want to understand what consumers are searching for and posting so we can understand trends. So we took that data, wrote SQL query around that, and then gave us like 10 solid cocktails. And it just so happens that all the base spirits were something that I have written about in my recipe book. Wow. And we thought, okay, the data is there pointing to 2 things that we should launch because those 2 things are not in the market. And out of that, Phreshly was born. So the story of building Phreshly literally was purely accidental. What I think about a lot too, though, is like, what if that tweet hadn't gone viral? Then what? Right. So yeah, that comes up a lot.
Yeah. So talk to us about that. So had that tweet not gone viral, was there any inclinations to jump into the alcohol industry?
Absolutely not. No. I think I would have been still working in tech. Fulfilled, maybe not, living nicely, perhaps, right? And I think, when the idea came, it was like, this is something that feels authentic and fulfilling for me. So that was like the point for me at the time.
So when the universe speaks, sometimes you need to listen.
Absolutely.
Inspiration can be anywhere.
Yeah.
And, you really have to pay attention to what it's saying sometimes.
For sure.
So you go into the cocktail book, Phreshly's born. You're off to the races, $10 million in the bank. It's all done. It's been all uphill. I mean, all. What is it? Sunny days and roses from there?
Yeah. Or in Silicon Valley terms, the hockey stick effect, right?
Yeah.
Everything starts from here and it's like, boom, you're not like the WeWork of beverages.
Was it like that?
No, absolutely not. I remember sort of like, we're going to do this, right? One of the biggest advices I got working in tech actually came from Peter Thiel. He came to go do his speech at Yammer. Yeah. And he said something that was very profound at the time, which was start marketing your product before it's ready. Right? So I go back in my book and I write a friend of mine who is a designer and I say, hey, design me some stuff that I can start posting on Instagram right now. Yep. And this kid, produces incredible stuff. But I'm like, I'm not sure because they're in Boston bottles. Yeah. And so I'm asking friends, what do you think this is? And they're like, oh, mouthwash, kombucha, ketchup.
And do you have the liquid at this time?
No. Nice. No liquid, nice. just like an idea. Yep. I just want to put it in front of people, get it ingrained in their heads, right? And so the design sucks. People were telling me it looks like, kombucha or mouthwash. So I'm like, all right. I go to Whole Foods and I see an aisle that everybody is there. And it's the RTD aisle. I'm like, oh, this thing should be in a can.
That's ready to drink, everybody who doesn't know.
Right. So I call him Zach, is his name. I'm like, yo, Zach, we need to design this in a can. Yes. He calls me back. I think it was literally, I remember very vividly, 7 minutes later, done. Get the images, stop posting it all on Twitter. I think another viral tweet about plants went up. And I was like, oh, speaking of plant-based things, this is a cocktail that I'm launching, and people loved it. And like, I didn't have a name even.
Right.
So I put up a type form page, started collecting people's emails, asking them questions like, what do you drink? What do you enjoy? And, just basically just doing things that didn't scale at the time. And it was really incredible process of just interviewing people and getting like insights.
So you have the entrepreneur, the alcohol entrepreneur's bug at this point.
Yep.
You're moving, you're running. What is your wife thinking?
She's thinking, what the is this guy doing? Right. And on that WTF moment, she comes to me and say, hey, because she's an attorney. I looked at some regulations, and do you know what 3-tier system is? I'm like, what the hell is that? He goes, okay, cool. You're producing this thing. You have to go talk to a distributor who then gets it into retail, who then gets into the consumer's hands. I'm like, no. Like, I can sell this online. She goes, you can't do that. So it's like, great, I'm gonna book. It's like, I'm gonna give you a gift. I'm gonna like book a consultation with alcohol attorneys for you to talk to. I talked to those people, and they're like, yeah, man, shut it down right now. It's a very tough space to be in, and I did not listen. Were they right? Absolutely, because it's been a stressful journey of trying to launch something in this really, really packed space. But I think the biggest gift that my wife gave me at the time was her ear,
Yes.
her counsel, and also pointing me in the right direction from the regulatory and legal perspective.
So at this point, and kudos to her too,
Yeah.
because it's so important to have a champion on your back. Whether you have a significant other or not, just having someone in your corner when you're going down any entrepreneurial journey is vital, especially in this crazy space. So
Absolutely.
Kudos to her for
Absolutely.
doing that.
Yeah.
So at this point, is it just you, or do you have partners? How did that come about?
Yeah. My friend Amma, who's my co-founder now, she's been bugging me for years about like doing something in food and bev. And I remember there's actually a tweet. I've thought about DM. I've thought about printing this. It was like, if you ever do something in beverage, call me. Let's build this. So I pinged her one evening. I'm like, it's happening. Let's go. We got on a call, discussed a few sort of like operational items, and we sort of like hit the ground running.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. This is a great time to take a pause and give a shout out to Passport Caribbean for this super dope T-shirt that I have. This is one of the softest shirts I've ever worn. It's great quality, beautiful fabric, great design. If you're ever in the market for some cool clothing, check out Passport Caribbean at Passport Caribbean on Instagram, passportcaribbean.com. So we know that any journey, especially when we're talking about the alcohol space, when there's so much to learn and to do it on your own is somewhat impossible.
Yeah.
It takes a tribe. How did you go about organizing your team, your partners in this whole venture?
Yeah, I think the way I think about team building is, sort of like, how do you build, quote unquote, your own Navy SEAL team, right?
Yeah.
Each person has very specific skill set that you don't have that they can teach you. I've worked with my co-founder, Amma, before. I know that she is literally what I call a breacher. She will kick down that door, right? Will come for your neck and ask those tough questions.
Yeah.
And I like that about her. So when it came down to like, okay, great, which co-founder do I want to work with? I knew one, she's an incredible operator, gone through YC and built an incredible company. When we were building Sika, she held people's feet to the fire, held them accountable, and always had our best interest at heart, right? She doesn't focus on people, she focused on the company. And so I think the co-founder relationship is always like any sort of marriage. It feels that way, right? Who do you trust? Who do you know can show up for you at times where you don't feel at your best? Who do you know that you can rely on? And who do you know that could be there as a backup to just make sure that you're doing the right things for the brand? And for me, it was a no-brainer. Amma was that person. I think culturally we understand each other in the sense that, one, we wanted to bring the flavors of Ghana, pair that with, Southern cuisine and flavor and put that into a can, right? She truly understands that. But also from an operational and finance perspective, she's like the right person to kind of like work with, and it made like absolutely perfect sense to work with her.
Do you guys ever bump heads?
Yes, a lot. Yesterday, right? We're because we've recently launched a few retail accounts here in GA, and we're like, great, I'm going to go do sampling on Friday. We need to get this tool, plug it into our Shopify, do all these fancy things. And she goes, no, let's just do something super simple that doesn't cost any money, but is scrappy enough to say, okay, great, this works. We need to take it to this point, right? So she really keeps me honest and makes me think of, it doesn't have to be perfect or pretty right now, right? And that goes back into the early inception of Phreshly. Start marketing it before the product is ready. So you don't have to do all things perfect at the moment. Just get scrappy as much as possible and then take it to like the next phase that is more so fits what your runway looks like. Because at the moment, the runway is not there. So why spend money on something that doesn't necessarily fit where the company is going?
Yeah, I've talked to quite a few founders, especially in the alcohol space. And I noticed that the theme that connects a lot of you is that scrappiness.
Yep.
But what also was very interesting to me, so me coming from an alcohol background, it's some things that I know, and I took it for granted that I knew those things.
Yeah.
But, you know, when they told me some of the trials and tribulations that they've been through from not being in the alcohol space, it kind of gave me the aha moment, like, wow, it's a special type of person that can go out there and jump into this industry without that knowledge. What has been one of the biggest challenges from a learning curve standpoint about the industry that you've encountered?
I think like beyond sort of like the 3-tier system and how it works, you know, which I remember going in this sort of like, you know, deep end of understanding, you know, temperance and the prohibition era stuff, right? You know, what drove it and all that. But the biggest challenge is path to distribution, right? I think that is the biggest challenge for a lot of, you know, Black and brown founders specifically in this space. And I'll give you an exact use case. A huge retailer, they're going to go nameless for now, said, hey, we want to put you in, you know, 100 of our stores across 4 states. And I go, okay, well, 100 is a lot. We're not a Series A brand. So let's just start with a market that makes sense. So we chose Florida because it's closer to Georgia. And they said, great, go talk to this distributor. They gave us a name. Actually, no, they sent an email with us CC'd. That distributor responded back with no in all caps and exclamation marks. Nothing else. I'm like, can you give us some context on why you said no? Again, nothing, right? They never said anything. And they go, don't worry, we have another distributor for you to go talk to. And this retailer is so nice and kind enough because they want to see us win.
Yeah.
So they did another introduction, spoke with the team, and they're like, we love the liquid. Everything is so amazing. By the way, when the cans arrived, it was scratched. And, you know, something else, some random excuse. And I said, thank you for that. By the way, we're moving to, you know, digitally printed cans in Q2. So that solved the problem that you're asking right now with regard to serviceability, specifically from the cans perspective. And they never responded back. And then we talked to another distributor locally here in Georgia, and they say, yeah, the liquid is great. Everybody really, really raves about it, but we're slashing down on, you know, your category of ready-to-drink cocktails. You know, here's the funny thing. I have inventory sitting right now, well, at a time, you know, 1,000 cases. We have not had a single retailer pick us up. I'm like, I don't care where the distributor is. I'm going to drive there. If it's in Austell, Athens, wherever, like I will drive there. And it's been, you know, that's a challenge. So we decided to sort of like keep it going scrappy. So that's the biggest challenge is, can you get a distributor to get a buy-in from you that is an indie brand that nobody knows about, that you just got into this space, you know, with regard to us, we've been here for 2 years. And I think a lot of the players in the game have been around this since Lincoln died, right? Yeah. And I think that's what they have going on for them.
So what is your process like to solve that problem?
Great. It's very simple. Bottoms up approach. This is what I did. A gentleman that I met when I moved here, shout out to Edmond Moye, who used to work at Moye Hennessy, was kind enough to say, hey, Paul, I'm going to gift you something. So he bought a list of all of Georgia accounts by depletion. Again, biggest gift ever. It's like, here's a list. Do with it what you may. So this is what I did. I drove around literally all of Georgia, knocking on retail doors and say, hey, my name is Paul. Here's my brand. You know, can you commit to X amount of cases? The stores would say yes. I'll go back home. I input into my own CRM system. And I started calling distributors, right? I have 20 stores committed. I have 30. I have 40. Now we have 300 committed to an average of 50 cases, right? You know, 25 cases per SKU per store. And so the goal to really curve that problem was, I'm going to do the work for you. All you need to do is have your sales rep just drop the product off. And that is still the challenge, right? So let's just say today, you know, a local distributor calls and say, hey, Paul, we're interested. Well, great. Sign the contract, right? You don't need to do anything. I've done the work for you. Just go drop off the product.
You did the heavy lifting.
Absolutely.
And I don't know how anybody can say no to this. This is a beautiful the package. I am very much a quality guy.
Thank you.
Inside and out. I haven't had a chance to taste it yet.
Yeah,
but I'm sold on the pack.
Thank you.
And you know, tell us a little bit. Tell us a little bit about the actual product.
Yeah. So we have 2 SKUs, bourbon and rum. I'll start with the rum flavor. The essence of Phreshly was we really wanted to transport the consumer to a place, right? Whether that be Accra, Ghana, New Orleans, Savannah, New York, wherever. That is the dream, the thing, right? So if you think about the transatlantic slave trade as an example, there's a lot of rum moving back and forth, right? You've been into Ghana before. There's palm wine. So that was the initial thought. Let's do like a palm wine cocktail. Well, that's a problem because by the time it gets to America, it will ferment to the gods and you can't do nothing with it. So there's a supply chain challenge there. So we're like, great, what does the Caribbean and the continent have in common? And that's rum. So we're like, great, let's do a modern take on a daiquiri. And that's where Get 'em came in. So we put blueberry, we added a little bit of nutmeg, we did agave nectar because we asked 6,000 of our customers, would you rather sugarcane or agave nectar? And they said, agave nectar sounds more fanciful. Well, great, cool. Right. That's what the consumer wants. That's not traditionally what is in a daiquiri, but we took a different turn on that. And then the base, we use rum for that. So we wanted to sort of like take this really incredible approach to it. And then for bourbon, you were like, great. Let us say you were like, down in New Orleans or somewhere in the South with your friends over like Crawford's Boy. What are you drinking? And people are like, bourbon. If it's in the summer, you're having, like a snow pop or, like strawberry lemonade or lemonade itself. And we go, interesting. How do you elevate that? So we did that, added rose water and lavender to that SKU. So it adds a really, really incredible finish. The bourbon is aged for 15 years. We sourced it directly in Kentucky, and it's really, really incredible in the nose. The one thing that I love is if you are in a quiet, closed room and you open one of our cans, it literally fills a room. And the fun thing is each of our cocktails, the collar on the bottom is literally the collar of the cocktail itself, right? So you get to actually like see that.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Wow, yeah.
So we threw in a little bit of an Easter egg, if you will.
Of course.
Yeah.
So was it gut? Like, what made you? So I get the liquids that you use.
Yeah.
But was it all gut that led you to that? Was there any data scrubbing? Like, how did you say, okay, I think this is right?
Yeah.
Yes, let's go with it.
It was definitely backed by data. We wanted to sort of like reverse the data, right?
Okay.
It's like, great. If you look at the past, 48 weeks within ready-to-drink cocktails, it's vodka that's leading.
Yeah.
And then the last, 68 weeks before then, it was tequila. And then peach flavors is always like the number one, both on TikTok and Pinterest and other places and also in like ROI data. But we're like, great. The thing that is always like in the 10th or 15th place is like bourbon and rum.
Yes.
Let's just start with there and see what the consumer thinks, right? So whenever we talk to consumers and we ask them, when you're drinking something at home, what is the base spirit? And they'll say, oh, I'm a bourbon person. Awesome, we got you. And somebody would say, oh, we're more a tequila fan. And so the tequila people, we challenge them to try our Get 'em flavor. It's made with rum, and they love it. One thing that we've also seen some of our consumers do is, a series that we call How Do You Phreshly? They basically throw our cocktails in a blender, add ice, and like mix slushes with it, and then they'll pour cava or prosecco over it, like especially in the summer, and we go, that's interesting. And so, to your question, data is backed. We rely very heavily on that, rely heavily on our community to learn what is happening, what they want. And so in taking that bottoms-up approach of we're going to take the last 5 that is least popular, we did that with these 2 SKUs, and then we're going to go top in the top 3 SKUs flavors that are doing well, which is vodka, tequila, and gin. And so these are the things that we want to launch as our next flavors.
So our consumers of this content are a lot of times in startups, and data is extremely essential.
Yeah.
But it's hard to get sometimes, and it's expensive.
Very expensive.
Do you have a gem to the startup out there that's saying, you know what, I need to get my hands on some data or do some type of generic scrub of something? What would you tell them to do?
Yeah, I think start with like social mining and social engineering, right? Everybody's sharing the thing on Twitter, Instagram, wherever. That data exists. I copy everything from like the top, like trending hashtags on TikTok. Like if you're on TikTok today, type in peach, you're probably going to see like 43 million hits on like different peach things that people are making. I'm like, great, that's the thing right there. If you're on Pinterest, women and men are dropping things on like what they want to drink when they go to Positano, where they go to Puerto Rico, where they go to Tulum. All that data is there. And so that's what we take, right? The stuff that is already there, that is backed by actual consumer behavior, that they want to try in the next 3 weeks, in the next 2 weeks. And we say, great, we're going to follow these trends and see if it tracks for the next, year or two. And that's what we really rely on.
Speaking of data, there's been a lot of things coming out recently through Complex and Rolling Stones about the top this and that. So we're going to deviate for a second. I got to ask you, who are your top 5?
Oof, top 5 regarding.
We're talking music now.
Oh man,
we're talking music. See, I told you this
man.
This is for the people.
Okay.
Specific
genre.
Around. We're gonna talk. We'll do hip hop.
All right, hip hop. Cool. Top 5, not in no particular order. I'm gonna go Rakim.
Oh.
Yep. Kool Moe Dee. I'm gonna throw Kendrick in there. From the West Coast, I'm gonna throw in E40 because I lived in the Bay.
Yeah.
Yep. And last but not the least, Jay-Z.
So this is always a little fun segment, right?
Yeah.
But
yeah,
it tells me a lot about you and your brand, right? So for people who don't know about Rakim, they call him the God MC.
Yeah.
He's an originator ahead of his time.
Yeah.
Right. You got E40 who kind of broke through the gates, especially being on the West Coast, in particular being in the Bay, from the Bay Area.
Yes, sir.
And expanded and kind of created a dialect, if you will,
sir.
crossed across the stream, right? And not to mention he also dibbles and dabbles in the alcohol space as well. But that's a whole other conversation.
True.
Kendrick is just a brilliant person. I would say for me, if you know anything about Kendrick, when he first started to really showcase his skills, he was very much kind of like what you would see. He had a little bit of street, a little bit of knowledge, but then when the people got hooked, he kind of took them on his journey.
Yeah.
Right? And then Jay, to me, is just the ultra businessman. And
Absolutely.
I see a lot of Phreshly
in
all of those. And then I'd be remiss to mention KRS-One, right?
KRS-One,
so
definitely.
I do because I noticed you didn't lead with this is an RT deal. That you said is a cocktail in a can.
Yes.
And you're changing the way people are thinking.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
And you're feeding them a little bit, and then I see something bigger happening behind it. I don't know what it is, but I see it. So I'm glad we asked that question.
Yes.
Glad we asked that question. How has fundraising been on this journey? Is it easy to get funding for these type of products? I see the smile. Talk to me.
The fundraising journey has been both infuriating, sad, and lastly difficult. And I don't think it's at the fault of the investors in this space. Looking to back alcohol brands, right? I think the focus for most VCs and angels has been what the climate is talking about with regard to metrics and KPIs or specific sort of like, proof points, right? How many retailers are you in and blah, 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 right? We spoke with one who said, you have one national chain that you want to launch in, we want to see more. And I remember my question back to them is, okay, great. We launch in 500 stores and our sell-through rate is 1 case a month versus focus regionally here in Atlanta, take 30 stores with, 20 cases sold on a weekly basis, not a month, right? So we have the sell-through rate, we have a brand built locally that people love, and we get to expand locally and then have success here and then go into other markets instead of doing that shotgun effect. Right. If you have a brand like that, isn't it something that you want to invest in, right? Isn't this what you as an investor do in taking a chance on a brand that says there's something here? And so the fact that they look at Phreshly and say, you're too early, I love the liquid, I love the story, I'm like, great. But also you're telling me to basically, like take myself everywhere, right? And then fail? Like I don't live in Florida. I don't have presence in Colorado. I don't have sales reps in California. So why go open in those markets that I cannot go do, in-store sampling, right? Here in Georgia, I know Thursday, Friday, Saturday, every weekend, I can go do that, right? In Johns Creek, in Alpharetta, in West End, in Midtown. I know because I'm here. I can support that, right? So like the journey of fundraising has been, really, really frustrating. So our focus has been great. Let's just focus on really scaling our company. If somebody comes along and say, I really love what these guys are doing, here is $1 million, we'll take that. For now, though, we're building that company as if there's no savior coming. And we can do it.
Smart move.
Yeah.
Smart move. And it's interesting because a lot of the investors in this space, no offense to them, but a lot of them don't understand the alcohol business whatsoever. And typically when you think about investing, especially when you get to the bigger VCs in particular, they're looking at it from a tech lens.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter if your product is tech adjacent, enabled, or whatever the case may be. It's just a different model.
Yeah.
Right. And it's almost like you have to do a bit of educating to the investor.
Yeah.
In addition to showcasing what you need to do. And that in itself is a full-time job, right? So
Very true.
approach to like, let's focus back on the brand right now and kind of I'm not saying you're saying if it happens, it happens, but just focusing on what you need to focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like, why continue down the road of like stressing yourself? And I think we spoke about vulnerability, earlier, right? You go on Twitter or Instagram or LinkedIn, it's like another brand posting, they just launched maybe 6 months ago and they've raised $8 million, right? Yeah, sure. Those founders worked at Bain Capital, they have that human capital that can like sort of like help them get there. And I've tried a lot of brands on the market, right? I've seen their liquid.
Yeah.
It's not that good.
It's a lot of garbage out there. Let's be frank.
And which is why, earlier point, distributors are slashing this category because what they do is they go drop off these not so good products.
Garbage.
Right. Zero in-market support because they think that, they're the best DDC bros out there in their, common projects and what the fuck ever, that, the brands are going to, the distributors are going to go do the work for them. Mm-hmm. Whenever we go to a distributor, we tell them very vividly, we want to help you circumvent distribution in this market. What that means is somebody purchased, Phreshly in Stone Mountain. 2 days later, we're going to send them an email or text message that says, hey, tower down the street from you, Grapes and Grain, whatever, sells Phreshly. Here's your coupon to go pick up one, right? We want to do local events. We want to do, out-of-home media things, to really drive local awareness. And I think you spoke about, the culture of drinking. I think like when people think about Phreshly now or maybe 5-10 years from now, I want that to be very synonymous with like, the cocktail culture here in Atlanta. That is the goal. This category is not clearly defined for the consumer, and we want to be a part of helping them do that. And I know I can do this for myself. And so how do you then collaborate with other brands that are using real spirits in your drinks to drive what premium means for the consumer, right? So, and as an example, if, Paul went to, Grapes and Grain or Tower, and there's a premium aisle, right? The consumer sees that and says, oh, I've seen these things on the internet, what premium category is, therefore I'm going to go pick Phreshly or this other brand because I know what premium is. But if I attempt to do that, I'm going to likely fail at it, right? And I think, tech companies do that really well, which is why they have APIs and integrations that can talk to other tools. And I think in alcohol, we need to do the same thing. I think we can all survive in the same chains, even if we were in the same category. Yeah. I'm very confident of that. I think people are so scared to put the best foot forward and say, hey, I want to collaborate with this, other founder to help form some sort of like committee and say, hey, let's call it Spirit Forward or whatever. I don't know. That is really helping educate the consumer today.
I was talking to a wine owner in Spain yesterday, and she was talking about we were talking about the podcast because she's going to be a future guest, and she was talking about being able to connect with folks that are doing the same thing and just kind of pick their brains and just building that community, right? So I'm curious from you, if you were talking in front of that community right now and they just ask you a simple question, hey, Paul, is there one thing that you wish you would have known when you were starting now, what would that be?
Don't compromise on flavor or market trends. Everybody's doing the wine-based, malt-based RTD now because it's, really easy to get into retail based on, those regulations, right? We knew what was stacked up against us, right? Spirit. I remember when I moved here, I didn't know that Georgia was a franchise state and that, you can do self-distribution. Carried, I think it was like 10 cases into Whole Foods. And like, we love this, but we can't buy it because we can't put it on our shelves. I'm like, oh man. Took it to a hotel. I won't say the name. And they bought it right off my hand. And that same day, Edmund, who I know, was like, hey, by the way, you can't do that.
Don't do that again, right? I was about to say, woo.
Yes, you can't do that here, right? Yeah. But it's like, that's the thing. Stay scrappy.
Yeah.
Took it to that hotel. They sold out that same day.
Right. Man. So we're going to play a little game.
Let's do it.
and it's just called Here's One of My Favorites.
Ooh,
It's
love
very
that.
short. Doesn't have to be long. It's just what comes to your mind,
Mm-hmm.
one of your favorites, right?
Yep.
Here's one of my favorite brands.
Oh man, Off-White.
Here is one of my favorite business leaders.
Sarah Blakely.
Here's one of my favorite songs.
It's Plenty by Burna Boy.
Here is one of my favorite movies.
Black Hawk Down.
Okay,
Yeah.
good movie. Here's one of my favorite things to avoid doing.
Sitting in Atlanta traffic. No.
Yes, sir. Here's one of my favorite things about Phreshly.
The education piece of being able to connect with our consumers and like share more about the business and the transparency of it. I love that. Talking to customers. Love it.
Here's one of my favorite qualities in a person.
Oh man. Vulnerability, burying your head in shame and asking for help.
Here's one of the things that I really like about myself.
Oh man. Creativity without thinking too much into anything.
Well done.
Yeah.
Well done.
Yes,
well
sir.
done.
Yes, sir.
Well, Paul, look, this has been an amazing conversation.
Absolutely.
Long overdue. I'm so glad we were able to
Thank you for
do
having
it.
me.
Obviously, we are sitting here and we're talking with each other,
Yeah.
but beyond this conversation, the value is the relationship.
Absolutely.
And I say this to you the same that I would say to anyone in that seat is how we can use each other. Let's figure that out.
Yes, sir.
And let's put action to words. Right?
Fantastic. Yeah.
For me personally, 2023 is
Yeah.
the year of intent.
Yes.
So I don't want to talk about it.
Yep.
So I don't even want to say if there's anything I can do to help you. Let's figure out what I can do to help, and let's get some time together and do it.
Fantastic.
I want to see you successful for a myriad of reasons. I know you're on your way, well on your way, and I'm glad you were able to share a little bit about yourself so
Thank
that
you.
people can see that journey and kind of see what I'm seeing as well. So
Yes, sir.
truly appreciate you.
Thank you.
If you all enjoyed this, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and go out and buy some Phreshly, guys.
Thank
Tell
you.
somebody. Likes are great, but vote with your dollars as well.
Yes,
so go
yes,
out there,
yes.
talk about it, but be about it. Until next time, cheers.
Thank you.